Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Attack Animal Gakuen, or Attack Animal Academy. It is a Famicom exclusive title that is very much inspired by Space Harrier by Pony Canyon. The game has you playing as a Japanese schoolgirl battling animals that have gotten loose and, well, are attacking. While Space Harrier was released for the Famicom, but only in Japan, it never saw release in North America. And as far as North American NES was concerned, there weren't many games like Space Harrier. 3D World Runner was similar to it, as well as one of the games that were part of the Myriad 6-in-1 Cosmo Cop. The game is broken up into 6 different levels and features different enemies added to the mix as you're going through the stages. You can run on the ground itself, or of course fly in the air in order to get a better perspective and dodge enemy fire. The biggest strategy in this game is going consistently in motion, either left and right or in a circle-like pattern, trying to do your best to avoid where the animals are coming from. Animals have distinct patterns to them, so when you're dealing with a certain type of enemy, you'll have an idea of how they're going to behave, such as the turtles here that kind of move in a diagonal pattern back and forth along the ground. You have the other ones that kind of come at you and then swerve right back around before they come all the way to the front of the screen, and then some animals will come fully towards the screen to start off, then back up and go again. Learning these patterns is what's key in order to know what you're going to need to do in order to survive. It is one hit and death, but you do get a good amount of extra lives through gaining a high enough score. At the end of the level, you'll have to battle a boss. Now, these bosses are pretty interesting, and there's 2 ways to defeat the boss. Either by destroying the boss itself, by hitting it enough times, or by destroying all the little minions that are with the boss. Once you destroy all the other enemies, or hit the boss enough times, the boss fight will end and you'll move on to the next stage. After completing Stage 1, we move on to Stage 2, known as the Sand Area. New enemies are introduced, and of course we have a little bit of a different aesthetic with the, brown and tan paneling, as well as cactuses being the main thing that's going to try to get in our way. Starting off with a barrage of mines that are flying at us. Moving in a nice little pattern, we can kind of see where the mines are going to be coming at us so we can figure out where we're going to need to be. Next up is the armadillos. These guys fly in and they hit off the ground and then come lunging towards the screen, so you easily know when one's about to start coming towards you. We saw the kangaroos and see them again here in the second level, as these of course bounce slowly towards the front of the screen before then going through. You'll notice a lot of my strategy isn't even trying to attack the many animals that are trying to take me out. A lot of times it's best just to avoid them altogether. One of the stranger enemies, though, you're going to have to deal with is the skeletons. Instead of being an animal, it's just a natural, human skeleton that usually ends up kind of coming on screen and then jumps or leaps towards the screen. As you're going through the sand level, the cactuses that are stationary on the bottom will, when you make it farther in, start to kind of leap up and get elevation, so it can be a little bit harder to dodge them. One way to really help out your survival is going to be getting the power-ups. Throughout the course of the levels, you'll come across little statues, these gray Buddha-like statues. If you pick these up, you'll gain new abilities, such as faster speed and more bullets being able to be fired before you have to wait. Having the power-ups is essential, really, to kind of survive for longer periods of time, because that added speed will allow you to get out of trickier situations a lot easier. If you do end up getting hit, though, and you had your power-ups, you will lose them when you end up coming back. There is a set of statues in every one of the levels, so you have a chance, at least through each stage, to gain those power-ups. The tricky part, of course, is going to be holding on to them. These, land sharks are up next, and they have kind of a half-circle pattern. They come out of one side and go into the other. The pattern's easy to follow. It's they do have direct fire on you. There's a lot of enemies in the game that will actually fire, homing, shots on you. Those are always tricky, and why the whole kind of thing of keeping moving is usually one of the better strategies. Now for this boss, this is really challenging to survive, but basically I'm gonna usually either hug the left or right wall and kind of get just the border of the stage and use that as my path in order to move around the area, dodge the fire from the boss, and try to keep firing out random shots until I either hit the boss or, more than likely, hit the skeletons around them. Once the skeletons are done, the boss has been defeated and we move on to stage number 3, known as the Fire Area. Since we've been able to maintain our power-ups throughout, we can actually use our gun currently to take out the objects at the bottom of the screen. In this level, the volcanoes, and they were the cactuses in the last level. Either way, with the more powerful shot, you are able to take these things out, so keep that in mind if you are able to maintain those power-ups, though it's pretty difficult to do so. You'll also notice that we've already gained a couple of extra lives in the short amount of time we've been going through the game thus far. Just staying around for a little bit of time, the score constantly keeps racking up, and right during this section is a nice spot if you have the power-ups to take out not only the volcanoes, but some of the ground-based enemies in order to get a little bit of extra points. The bird enemies introduced in this level are one of the more annoying ones because they come at you pretty fast and they hit the front of the screen. So if you're anywhere in that vicinity, you're going to get hit by them as they kind of like plop against the screen in the front, and then they end up retracting. One of the boss fights we'll have to deal with has them as the enemy with them, and it can be a bit difficult to actually get around in that one. Here we have more armadillos, and there's just a ton of them, and I usually end up having absolutely terrible aim when it comes to them in particular, trying to line up the shot. So most of the time with the armadillos, I just want to try to find the safe zones, wherever it may be, to try to make sure that I don't end up getting run into by them. About halfway through the stage, the volcanoes themselves will also start to fire at our character, so be wary of those. Like I said, keeping on the ground if you have the power-up will help in order to avoid some of the volcanoes. You'll be able to shoot a few of them. This is one of those really obscure Japanese games that I ended up finding a long time ago and actually became a fan of it because I like Space Harrier style games so much. And I actually did a playthrough of it on my original YouTube channel a long time ago, and I thought it was by time I actually give this game another shot, and I forgot just how difficult it was when I started messing with it. Trying to get the patterns down is what took me a while. Basically, I was able to kind of know what sets of enemies were going to come when, make sure I knew where each of the power statues were going to be. So always know what's right before the power statues so that you know when you'll be able to get to the ground and be able to collect them without any issue. And since we didn't end up getting Space Harrier on the NES, and 3D World Runner is okay, I really wish this would have come over. It would have been one of those really obscure hidden gem type things had it actually gotten an NES release, but once I discovered it, I probably would have fell in love with it. Next up we have the boss, which is this weird devil-like guy, and he has the birds flying at you. If you can get in a nice safe spot, you can hit a few birds in a row because you were able to fire out so many bullets at once, but even then we gotta kinda go in a really weird pattern to try to stay ahead of his blast. A lot of times I'm just focused my eyes on the enemy fire and not even paying attention to the other enemies on screen. I just kinda keep firing in the general vicinity and hope my bullets hit. So a lot of times with the bosses, there's not a set strategy. There may be one. Maybe people have like patterns that they can recognize and be able to get maybe a safe spot where you're unable to get hit. But nothing like that I was able to discover while playing through the game as many times as I have. And what would a game with a fire-based level be without a water-themed stage? This stage is actually really awesome because not only is it the underwater setting, they actually change up the character's sprite. She's now like in the swim outfit, as well as she even has like flippers on her feet. So it's kind of cool that they went to that little bit of detail, and in fact the costume will change up again when we make it to the next two levels in the title. The starfish that kind of massively attack you during the course of the early parts of this stage are a bit of a hassle because they kind of like move in a little bit of a jagged pattern because they're still flying towards the screen, but they shake a little bit as they do so, so it can be sometimes a bit difficult to read exactly where they're going to hit in the front of the screen. After a whole bunch of flying seaweed, this is where the Buddha statues are, so we'll make sure we grab them. And then we have a whole bunch of a sea anemone kind of flying at us. It looks a little bit like a McDonald's French fry holder as they're moving by so quickly. It's hard to get kind of a nice, good look at them. But either way, if you stay pretty high up on screen, there's less of a chance that they're going to be able to hit you up there. And sometimes, even when it looks like it, the hit detection is a little bit off at points when it comes to some things flying if you're at the very top of the screen. The sea urchin enemies really don't add anything too challenging into the mix as we make it about halfway through the level at this point. The squid enemies are probably the hardest ones added to the level though, because if you end up hitting them, they end up breaking apart into a whole thing of mini squids that hurl towards you, they home in on you. So it's honestly best not to hit them, but if you're trying to get a couple of extra points, if you do make contact, make sure that you keep moving so that that homing shot of squids ends up going past. Nearing the end of the level, we have another huge barrage of the starfish-like weird guys that kind of come flying at you, some of which are firing shots. And then you have a little bit of the sea urchins before we make it to the boss, which ends up being a giant turtle. Now, for this encounter, like all the rest, we have to deal with other enemies along with the turtle itself. You have the sea urchins, of course, that are going to come out, but you can get in a nice safe spot sometimes and hit a few of the urchins if we kind of go back and forth, left and right, and this will allow us to keep hitting a few of the urchins while dodging a lot of the fire from the turtle. The more enemies we destroy, though, the more shots the turtle will start to fire out, so you're going to have to move a little bit quicker when you get to the end of the fight. But once they're done, we're moving on to Stage 5, the second to the last area of the game, known as the Dark Area. Our outfit has once again changed up, and I like that not only do they change up the character's outfit, they also change up the icon of the character's lives in the upper left corner, which is just a nice little touch overall. The level starts off though with a huge barrage of flames, that just fire comes flying towards you. Right after that though, evil trees and other stuff tries to hurl its way, basically these ghost-like cobra enemies that kind of like slither across the ground and then fly up into the air. This also, of course, is where the game is really ramping up its difficulty. The bat-like owl things, I don't know what they're supposed to be. Either way, these guys are really annoying because they kind of fly directly towards the screen. You can kind of see them coming, but they move a little bit, like up and down, like kind of in a wave pattern as they're flying towards, which can be a bit difficult to judge. Right after is the alligator guys. I think they're supposed to be blue alligators. They kind of, not only are they in front of you, but a few come directly behind. These are really annoying to kind of know when they're going to be coming up so that you're not directly in the area for when they're going to come forward. Another new enemy that's introduced in this stage is the spiders. These things fall directly from the sky and then fly to the back. And they can be more challenging than others to kind of judge because you're going to see them start to falling on screen very fast, and to try to get out of the way is really difficult if you don't have any of the upgrades. Right after that first spider fell though, you notice that that was where the upgrade statues were located for this particular level. Right after a series of the land sharks, you're going to have more of those bats coming up. At first, the bats start to fly towards the screen, and a few of them will go all the way through, and then other ones will go backwards. Right after this set, which isn't too bad, you'll then get another whole giant mess of them coming towards you, all of them firing out projectiles, and most of them coming completely through the screen. So be very careful, move around the edges of the screen in order to try to do your best to stay out of their line of sight. After them, you'll have more of the Cobra guys sliding all across the bottom. You can stay on the ground itself as they're swerving back and forth. The ones you're unable to hit will kind of fly up into the air and go past you, thankfully. After dealing with the blue guys and a series of evil birds, be sure to hang out on the far right side of the screen to avoid the wave of fireballs that start coming in. They come in from a diagonal pattern and go in kind of a circle as they go towards the back, so not difficult to dodge, but if you know they're coming, you can get out of the way. Next up, though, we have just a whole horde of more enemies, and keep that fire button going so we can try to take out as many of these guys as possible as they're coming towards us. Right near the end is another one of the sets of spiders, and then we get to, well, a spider-based boss who has spiders with them. So the whole theme kind of works for this level. The spiders fall in, so be away from them, and then once they fall in, they then will go to the back, and this is when you'll have the opportunity to start moving around more and start firing. It's difficult to really pay attention because they're flying towards you along with the shots from the spider boss itself. So a lot of times during this fight, I end up destroying the boss before I end up destroying all of the little minions. I do end up taking a hit though, making this part a little bit more difficult. When I run out of speed, I go into more of a circle pattern, as I'm able to dodge a little bit and get a few more shots off since I'm only able to get 2 bullets out at a time. But thankfully I'm able to still take him out, and we move on to the 6th and final level of the game. Not having any power-ups going in, it's going to be essential that I'm able to pick up the power-ups. I could still lose a life or 2 before those statues appear, but I want to make sure that I do end up grabbing them so we have them going into the boss. It won't be, of course, full power-up by any means, but it will help us out greatly. Since we went from a dark-themed level, or a hell-themed level almost, we're now into the light or sky-themed level. I guess you could look at it as a hell and heaven kind of basis. Either way, an interesting theme. You don't always see sky-based levels in games. Doesn't really change up much, though, for the overall gameplay. We're still dealing with a lot of the same enemies. Here, I'm able to get 2 of the 3 power-up statues. Unfortunately, there's such a big gap over between the 2 statues, I have to only get 2 of them. The speed doesn't allow me to get them all unless I had already had 1 speed upgrade going in, which of course I didn't. But either way, that should be enough to help us get through the rest of this level. In fact, this level is a bit easier than the previous stage, in my opinion. There's a lot of the giant columns. We do have the blue alligator-like guys, but if you're able to do a little bit of dodging, you pick up at least that 1 speed upgrade to help you, it's pretty easy to dodge most of these flying columns, since you kind of get an idea of where they're coming, of course, since you see them so far in the distance coming towards you, instead of just like out of nowhere. Right after that giant wave of columns, we have a series of the sharks. These are going to be the enemy that we end up facing during the boss encounter here, so just kind of keep moving. I'm not able to really hit many of them, but at this point I'm looking more to survive with the power-ups and getting to the boss fight than I am really concerned with taking out the enemies. The annoying flying bat owl type things are in this level as well. You can kind of see them coming, but of course they're going to come fully at the screen, so you want to make sure you're moving enough to keep away from them as they fly towards, and they do have their homing shots, so just like always, we're going to keep moving in whatever way we can, followed up by these weird enemies. I'm not even sure exactly what they're supposed to be. They're like an evil robotic sun, basically just going around in a circle and then firing out lots of stuff before eventually retreating. Thankfully they don't come forward. Right after them, though, is those annoying spider enemies that we were introduced to in the last level, but they only have a small set of them that we have to deal with before a giant wave of the blue alligator-like guys. With what seems like a ridiculous, unending amount of those blue guys, it finally does end, and then we have another wave of the sharks. Instead of kind of going in the half circle right away, they kind of just pop out, and then start going a little bit more into their patterns. Just keep on moving in order to dodge the home-in shots that they're going to be firing out, and of course you can fire back in order to maybe take out 1 or 2, but for the most part, I'm just going to keep on moving to try to get away. The final part of the level before the boss is more of the columns. Staying close to the top of the screen is a good strategy. Also having that bit of speed can help you move a little bit, but if you don't have any of the speed upgrades, stay relatively close to the top or bottom of the screen, giving you a little bit easier of just moving left and right in order to get way of the columns that are going to be flying towards you. They come at you at a ridiculous speed, but if you're able to survive it, it's time for the final boss of the game, which is this weird multi-headed snake thing. The sharks come fast and furious during this aspect. You can just see how fast they're moving. So it's really hard to kind of get shots off on them at all, while also immediately then getting out of the way of their attacks. The boss, like always, will be firing out shots at you as well, and you can decide to take out him or take out the guys. This is a really tough fight. Being the final boss, of course it should be, and the firing shots from the boss itself will get a lot faster to the point that it's almost impossible to dodge without having at least one of the speed upgrades. Once you deliver the final hit though, either to him or to his little minions, you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Animal Attack Academy. So there you have it, guys, the ending to Attack Animal Academy, or Attack Animal Gakuen. I know I'm saying that wrong, and I fully apologize for that, but I do like the ending overall. It's kind of a nice little ending with just her saving her friend or whatever, and then kind of like firing little shots. You have a little bit of text at the bottom as it's going through, which happens to actually be in English, interestingly enough, and then you get the final thank you, and then you could start the game over again if you wanted to. But with that, guys, it's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.